So she's just over 9 pounds. So she's a nice size for this because I've created a really big support there, not knowing exactly how big she was. So that's good. And you can see my movements are really quite slow whenever it comes to holding a baby. So when it comes to wrapping her, I'm going to leave her nappy on. There we go. So my knees are my friend in all of my newborn shoots, but I've got long legs, so if you find that you don't have long legs like me, sitting flat on the floor with your legs out and with a couple of little towels underneath your legs to give you that support is usually the best way I find to wrap babies. So I'm just got to figure out which side. Here we go. So I want her to stay nice and sleepy, and then I'm going to keep my hands on her arms because when babies are born they have one natural fear, and that is the fear of falling. So that's where they get that startle reflex from. So I want to make sure that she doesn't feel startled in any way and like she's not supported. When it comes to handling babies, your hands should become an extension of them. So my hands aren't stiff, they're just resting on her, so it's more about the weight of that hand and making sure that it's nice and warm. So what I want to do is I want to be able to see her arms and legs in this setup. So I want to bring the wrap across her belly, and then I'm going to bring it around her body. So just make sure she's nice and flat here. And then keeping in mind that her head's here and her bottom's here, and she's going to be facing up towards that ceiling. So knowing where those little arms and legs are going to be placed. So I've got my wrap shorter at one end, so I'm going to bring that across her belly, but I just need to bring it down behind her shoulders a bit more. And these are nice, stretchy, long wraps, so they've got lots of elasticity in them. And the trick to wrapping is making sure that you pull it nice and firm, nice and tight, but obviously not too tight that you're, making them feel uncomfortable. Shh. Okay, so over that belly, this is going to help anchor this end down so that as I start to bring it around the outside of her body, just make sure I don't get my shirt in there. It's going to keep it in place. Okay, just bring that up a bit tighter. I love these little hands. Okay, so because I'm going to be shooting from here down, I want to make sure that the way that I cross her feet over as well are going to be in the right direction. Because if I have this foot here coming straight up towards the camera, it's going to be a very large, flat surface that'll be distracting in my image. So I want to make sure that the feet are crossed over in a way that that's not going to happen. So what my plan is to have this foot come over the top, and what it's going to do is then kind of dangle down. So we'll see how that goes. So now I want to pull this up. I've just got a hair. Towards this shoulder. Here we go. And now I'm going to come around the body. So using that shoulder as that anchor point. I'll bring these feet up to start with. So down. And with any of these sort of more creative setups, I tend to be more particular about, you know, all the little finer details, making sure that everything is perfect. So I'm giving that a really good pull, and you can see how I'm using my chest and my body to keep her legs in place. And then coming up underneath her head, so you can see my hand is supporting the back of her neck there. And bringing that around. I know. It's a big story. So I just go around as many times as I can until I sort of start to run out of fabric. What a good baby. Pushing half of that wrap down so that the weight of her body is what's going to anchor it. So this wrap is about 1.5 meters long, so it's nice and long, which gives me lots of length. So there is white elements to this photograph, which means that my exposure is going to have to expose for those highlights so that I don't lose any detail. Because if I was to enter this into, say, a competition, then if I overexposed the highlights, there were no detail in it, then I would be judged quite poorly for that. So taking into consideration all of those things as well. All right, so we've got our will. The idea now is to place her down with her back here, so she's basically going to be on her side. Isn't she gorgeous? So I'm making sure I support her little head the whole time. Just making sure that none of those little cranes are touching her there. Okay, so that looks like it's supposed to start to look, which is really good. Because I'm doing this live for the first time. The execution is always slightly different to the idea. And usually I have my fake baby to practice with, and I didn't bring her this time thinking, oh, I'm only photographing one newborn, it'll be fine. But it is always great to test things out like this to see, you know, that placement and so on. All right. So in terms of supports, I don't think I need any more, but what I do need to do is just kind of turn her down a little bit more, and then I'm going to bring her face up towards that ceiling. So I'm just going to slide my hand down this way and in behind her little back. Shh, shh, shh. Little Lorelei is just over 3 weeks old. So she's probably going to be more aware, more alert of what I'm doing, and a bit more sort of sensitive to my touch. I'm just going to give her a little turn here. There it is. And I'll bring that foot out, and I think I'm going to leave it in. Okay, so there's little extra cranes. Oh, they're behind me. I'm just going to place them sort of in around her back here to fill those sort of shadow places. You know, like I said before, it's okay when your ideas don't work. But right now, that feeling of like excitement and giddiness that I'm getting because it's working and she's sleeping is, it's quite hard to contain. Garrett knows all about that. Okay, I'm going to try not to be too much of a perfectionist here. Right, so what I want to do now is just bring her little face up, and I'm pretty much ready to take this shot. So it's all about perfecting that pose. So I'm just bringing her little hands away from her face here. So using this hand, and it's just the weight of my hand on her there. And we'll see if we can bring a little chin up here. Then I want to bring this hand here and behind her face. Over here. Whoop. Jade, can I get you to come in? Can I get you to sit just here and keep your hand here for me, just while I position her little head? There we go, just nice and soft. Okay, so that way it frees up my hands to be able to bring her little head into position here. So whenever I'm doing something like this, I always make sure I get my safe shot. And what we might do, Garrett, is start to bring that light over and turn that on. Okay, coming forward just a bit more. So what I'm looking at here now is the placement of this light. And because we've got you know, like a 3D object there, it's going to create some shadows. So I want to use this like a sun, where it's going to come directly down and above to really limit some of those shadows, but there's still beautiful shadows. So we're going to come just in a little bit more there, and then turn this light this way just a bit more, and I'm looking at where those shadows are falling now, and remembering that the intensity of the light comes from the center, and because I want a lot of light in here to fill those shadows, because I want it to have that beautiful kind of light, airy feel with still a few shadows to define features, that's probably the perfect place for it. And when you are placing your light, you're not looking at the light on the subject, you're looking at the shadows that show you the direction of that light. So I'm pretty much ready to start getting my safe shot here. Grab my camera. I'm going to shoot this at 2.8 still, so fairly wide open. I'm going to focus on her eye. And I already know, with knowing my camera and understanding, you know, this tonal range, that I'm going to have to slightly overexpose it because of these lighter items in here. If I underexpose my photos, then I'm going to have to do a lot of, you know, retouching to kind of, you know, get it to where I want it to be. So I want to get it as perfect as possible in camera in terms of exposure. I always shoot with my histogram up on the back of my camera. And obviously if I'm shooting from above, I need to make sure that the camera strap is around my neck. So we might, how's she going in terms of letting her go there? Is she nice and relaxed? If she moves, that's okay. She's having a wriggle. I just want to get this blanket pulled nice and tight. Those little noises. Yeah, better. Babies are just like us. If they're not comfortable, they're going to move. Just grab that towel there, Jade, and pop it on the floor so you can give that a bit of a pull. She's moved that foot, but I'll get my first exposure while I'm up here. Put that around me. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to look through first. I'm going to move my focal point, and I'm going to change my exposure to 1/3 of a stop overexposed to start with. My ISO is at 640 in here. It's not bright, but I want to be able to keep that shutter speed up. And I'm going to pop it on live view just for a second. So I can use my neck as support here. And I want to leave plenty of space around. Could you just reach that little crane there and bring it down for me this way a little bit? It's just a bit high. Yep, thanks. So bringing up my histogram, making sure I've got lots of details in that highlights, and that is exactly where I want it to be. So now I'm just going to pop her back into that pose and get her perfect. And she's like, yeah, big stretch. So the reason I keep putting the legs down is because when they're kind of up and not in that body frame, they can become distracting. And what I try to do is keep everything in this space so that it's not leading your eye out of where I want it to be compositionally. So that's why posing is so important. Shh, 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 shh. It like takes 2 seconds to take a photo, Lorelei. So one of the reasons that she's wriggling is because I can hear a little bit of wind coming out there of the other end. So she's just getting rid of that. It's going to make her a bit more comfortable. what I'm going to do now is, because she wants this leg out, I'm just going to go with her and bring this foot in underneath here and see what that looks like. Shh, 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 shh. Fingers are really important to get nice and flat, making them look comfortable. And that's the whole thing. You want to make them look as comfy as possible. Don't move. She's playing with me. Okay. And I'm just going to get one more. Yeah, that's good. Done. So you can see I'm not taking many photographs. I'm taking enough to get my exposure. I've got my exposure pretty right in camera. My histogram's showing me that I've got lots of detail in those highlights so that I can really bring those out in Photoshop. Being able to sort of play with all of this detail is going to be perfect, and it's giving me that visual as to what I want. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. But isn't it funny, when I'm sort of standing here and I'm looking at this from many different angles, it's not until you actually see it on your camera or on a screen that you go, wow, it actually kind of looks a little different to how I see it. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm happy with that. And she was perfect, right? Absolutely perfect. Okay, so in terms of identifying some of the other things that will, in terms of newborn photography, obviously safety's at your forefront, making sure that everything's been communicated back and forth with the parents, creating beautiful concepts that resonate with their story, and yeah, this is going to hang on their wall and it's going to have a meaning for them, which is probably the most rewarding part about doing this, other than getting to play with beautiful babies.